A hot summer evening in New York promised to be one of the most discussed in the media space. Rumors were circulating everywhere that journalist Sarah Miller, known for her merciless straightforwardness and readiness to expose her interlocutor, had invited the First Lady of the United States, Melania Trump, to her talk show. According to insiders, this meeting was to be broadcast live on one of the country's leading television channels without prior recording. No one doubted that the potential confrontation would attract a huge audience to the screens. Many were looking forward to the opportunity to see how the journalist, accustomed to provocative statements, would test the unapproachable image of the president's wife. And yet, even the most sophisticated TV viewers could not guess how tense this interview would be and what an incredible turn would happen in the studio, after which it would become clear to many. The one who was so often called quiet and timid is capable of withstanding any attacks directed at her. The studio was in the new, ultra-modern building of the television center, where Melania arrived early with her team. Throughout the evening, she seemed calm and reserved, as if she already knew what awaited her. However, such composure was inherent in the president's wife from the very first day of her appearance on the political arena. When she first took the position of First Lady, many did not take her seriously. Her Slavic accent immediately became the object of ridicule, and heated discussions in the press invariably revolved around the question of whether she was able to speak American enough and whether she should be more active. One could often see headlines like, "Is Melania Trump worthy of being First Lady?" or "Can a former model become the voice of an entire nation?" Melania herself, however, was unwavering. She rarely responded to such hype, preferring to respond with action. Charity, support for programs aimed at protecting children from cyberbullying, and the implementation of initiatives that she herself considered necessary for society. Journalists, on the contrary, often tried to make Melania talk more, to provoke her to reveal personal or political secrets. But she knew how to avoid direct conflicts and stay in the shadow of major events, focusing on what she really considered important. Now, sitting in the dressing room and preparing for the broadcast, she already felt that this evening could be different from everything that had happened to her before. Sarah Miller's reputation as a reporter hunter for hot sensations spoke for itself. Such a journalist was not shy about making harsh statements, could go for the most risky provocations for the sake of ratings, and always brought out the guests' emotions. The corridor behind the scenes was bustling with activity. Sarah's assistants were running around with cameras and folders. Technical staff were setting up microphones and lights. A soft but tense hum created an atmosphere of anticipation of something very loud and unpredictable. Meanwhile, the audience had already taken their seats in the hall, hoping to witness a captivating spectacle, because Sarah was both loved and feared for such broadcasts. With her questions, she was able to ignite a discussion to a real flame. Some viewers who came to support the First Lady sat with quiet excitement, fearing that the journalist would not adhere to elementary rules of etiquette. But most of those present were thirsty for provocation and sharp moments, so that they could then discuss each harsh attack on social networks. As the opening credits played and the studio lights finally engulfed the room in their bright light, Sarah Miller walked out to the audience with her trademark predator-like smile. She briefly introduced the evening's main topic to the audience, noting that she had a special and very interesting guest today. Melania entered the frame to thunderous applause. Of course, not everyone clapped sincerely. Many of the hands sounded more out of politeness. But still, her appearance effectively emphasized her elegant black dress and confident posture. There was not a shadow of fear on her face, only a polite, barely perceptible smiling expression, which is sometimes called a diplomatic mask. Whatever the journalist had prepared, the First Lady was clearly going to answer with dignity. Sarah's initial questions were fairly innocuous, about charitable initiatives, what prompted Melania to get involved in children's educational programs, her vision for working in the White House. For several minutes, those present might have gotten the impression that the interview would be fairly calm, and many were already feeling a certain annoyance. Would nothing scandalous really happen? However, Sarah Miller was a master of setting traps. This was what her competitors reproached her for, and for this she was idolized by viewers who loved the tabloids and loud revelations. Soon, when everyone had time to relax a little, she suddenly changed the line of conversation. She began to reproach the First Lady for making too few public statements on the most important issues, creating the impression of a silent presence in the shadow of her husband. It's no secret that many Americans see you as nothing more than a silent symbol, Sarah said with a narrowed eye. Do you think you have any influence on the White House's policy, or is it enough for you to be a decorative element, a cute decoration? A tense pause hung in the hall. A couple of spectators even coughed nervously. Someone whistled softly. Melania, at the same time, pushed a strand of hair from her face, and after a short pause in order to emphasize the seriousness of her words, answered. You have the right to your opinion, as does anyone else in this country. My work speaks for itself. Even if for some I remain a decoration, it is only because they do not try to see a little deeper than what the tabloids present. I do what I think is right, and I do not seek to turn family life into a merciless arena for the sake of headlines. The answer was not delivered in a brash or harsh tone, but it was met with clear support from the audience. Several held up signs with messages in support of Melania and began clapping more vigorously. Sarah glanced briefly at the director behind the camera, who signaled her to continue the attack. Clearly, the goal of the program was to boost ratings by asking the most pointed questions possible, without shying away from personal matters. They say you weren't ready for such publicity, and the people still doubt whether you even understand what it's like to be the face of the nation, she continued, dramatically raising an eyebrow and making it clear that she was going to go deeper. After all, your interviews are so rare. Maybe your accent really does prevent you from communicating effectively with America. A loud murmur went through the audience. Some stared at the First Lady with undisguised curiosity, waiting for her reaction to such an attack. Melania herself exhaled, as if giving herself time to collect her thoughts. Over many years of living in the States, she had heard this too often, reproaches that she was not American, that her lips did not sound correct enough, that the First Lady should have perfect speech. But America is a country of many accents, an interweaving of hundreds of cultures and traditions. And yet, critics again and again rested on her foreign origin. My accent is a reflection of my journey, she replied, keeping her tone polite and even. I am proud to speak multiple languages, and my accent is not a mistake, it is part of my identity, reminding me that America is a land of opportunity for people from all over the world. I am not ashamed of where I came from, and I am grateful that this country can now call my home. These words caused a storm of applause. Even the most skeptical viewers could not help but notice the elegance and sincerity in Melania's voice. But Sarah knew that to make the show truly ratings-wise, she had to go even further, touch on the most painful topic, the relationship with Donald Trump, which is surrounded by an endless number of rumors and assumptions. At some point, she moved a little closer to the guest, as if for a private conversation, although everything was broadcast live. I can't help but ask about what worries millions of viewers, the journalist said, and her voice was already ready to finish off her interlocutor. Recently, what's more, for several years in a row, there have been rumors in the press that you and Donald Trump are almost formally maintaining your marriage. They say that you rarely interact with each other in public and often look distant. And if you believe the rumors, there has been no love or mutual respect between you for a long time. Do you think it is important to clarify all these issues to society, or do you prefer to hide the real state of affairs? These words exploded in the studio. Someone in the audience seemed to start shouting outraged remarks at Sarah. Someone started filming the events on their phone again, in order to later post the loudest moment of the interview. The security guard standing at the aisles tensed up, assessing the situation. Very close to the set, in the staff room, several members of Melania's team grabbed their heads. The situation was at risk of getting out of control. The moment that many had been dreading had finally arrived. Sarah had taken hold of the most delicate nerve of the family topic. But instead of being confused, the First Lady only slightly raised her chin and looked straight into the journalist's eyes, as if to make it clear that such a provocation would not break her. "Sarah, your words do not sound like a question, but rather like a condemnation and a little irony," Melania said softly, but her voice remained confident. "You are an experienced reporter, and no doubt you are perfectly able to distinguish the noise of the tabloids from real life. My family is my personal territory. I am not obliged to tell the whole country how we communicate at home." I think viewers turn on such programs not to delve into the details of private life, but to learn about how the First Lady sees her public mission. Yes, in the public space we do not always demonstrate closeness, but this does not mean that it is not there. Everyone has their own path in marriage, and it is not obliged to conform to the templates that you or the press are trying to impose. In the silence that followed, one of the cameramen, afraid to miss a minute of this dialogue, could be heard switching the camera to a close-up of Melania's face. The First Lady's eyes looked calm and dignified, although a certain firmness could be discerned in them. Sarah, however, unexpectedly did not have an immediate answer. Apparently she expected protests, tears, or on the contrary, a flash of anger. But she received a calm, strong, and confident speech. The audience, feeling that something important was happening before their eyes, began to applaud. And now the applause was louder than ever on this broadcast. And if at the beginning of the program someone came only to gawk at a possible scandal, now everyone understood that they were witnessing the moment when the First Lady managed to prove to everyone that there was something more to her than just an elegant picture next to her influential husband. Watching the reaction of the audience and the team, Sarah seemed to lose the thread for a moment. She did not expect that her attempt to pin her against the wall would cause such strong public support in favor of Melania. And yet, professional skills quickly prevailed. She knew that the show must go on, which meant that she had to immediately switch to another topic, trying to extricate Melania from at least the slightest mistake. The journalist decided to press even harder, mentioning one of the most controversial aspects, the U.S. immigration policy, on which the president, of course, has a direct influence. "Let me ask you, Donald Trump has spoken harshly about illegal immigrants more than once. How do you, a person who once came to this country, feel about the fact that your husband makes life difficult for many foreigners in every possible way? Do you really support a policy that does not allow people to realize the very American dream that you realized?" The air seemed to freeze. The question was undoubtedly political and pointed, containing not only a hint of hypocrisy, but also an attempt to pit the First Lady against her own family. Someone in the room gasped loudly, anticipating a possible storm, but Melania remained outwardly unperturbed, only her breathing quickened slightly. "The issue of immigration is always complicated," she answered after a short pause. "On the one hand, America has been and remains a land of opportunity. On the other hand, any country has the right to protect its borders and create laws that ensure the safety of its citizens. I do not write political laws. I am not the president. However, I can use my voice to remind people that behind the numbers and statistics are the destinies of families. Yes, I have spent many years adapting to American traditions and norms, and I also know how many difficulties there are along the way. But I want to believe that we, as a nation, can find ways to combine safety with compassion and humanity." This remark again caused some viewers to applaud, and some of the opponents of the president's policies began to shout something about double standards. Sarah tried to catch up again, adding, "But why do you rarely make public comments in defense of people who have no opportunity to immigrate legally? Shouldn't you be their defender, since you yourself came from abroad in the past?" To which Melania responded, lowering her voice, but making it even more firm. I can't solve all the problems on my own, but I do everything I can. I support charities that work with immigrants, children from low-income families who have no one behind them. I talk about the importance of compassion and mutual understanding within the framework of my projects. At the end of the day, the position of the First Lady in our country is not written into any constitution. I am not an elected official. I am a partner to my spouse and a representative of the American people in the sense that I am ready and able. And I really believe that our duty is to help those who strive for a better life without threatening the country itself. There was another pause. No one expected Melania's speech to be so thorough and confident. Sarah, trying to save face, looked at her watch, realizing that the broadcast was already going on longer than planned, and the tension in the room was growing. However, it was precisely thanks to this tension that the ratings would undoubtedly skyrocket. But the journalist, trapped in her own aggressive tactics, understood that she had run out of truly killer techniques. All attempts to hurt, touch, humiliate Melania, one way or another, ran into a solid armor of calm dignity. The audience liked it more and more, and it seemed as if the show, conceived as a crushing attack on the First Lady, had unpredictably turned into the latter's triumph. "Okay," Sarah said, smiling falsely. "Let's talk about the image the press creates. Don't you think you're not open enough in the media's eyes? Maybe that's what's causing all these rumors. People see you less than they'd like, and they start making up their minds." Melania only smiled with the corner of her lips, realizing that this proposal was already an obvious attempt by the journalist to somehow level the playing field, so as not to appear completely defeated in the verbal duel. "When I think it's necessary, I go to the press. When I see the point, I give interviews. When I see the need, I talk about problems that seem important to me, but I won't do it for the sake of empty noise or to drown out more gossip. And if this irritates someone, well, that's their problem." At that moment, the room literally exploded with enthusiastic shouts and applause, which somewhat drowned out the last words of the First Lady. Sarah, realizing that nothing more provocative could be squeezed out, reluctantly admitted that it was time to sum it up. And yet, she was not going to directly admit her failure. "Well, Melania," she said loudly, over the storm of applause, "I'm sure the audience learned a little more about you today. I hope you'll continue to find time to go on air so that you don't end up with a reputation as the silent queen, and so that I don't have any excuse to ask awkward questions." Melania, in turn, did not take her eyes off the journalist, as if to say, "I am ready to answer if there is something to answer." Having shaken Sarah's hand, she thanked the audience and left the stage to a roar of applause. Many viewers found it hard to believe that the interview, which was supposed to be a crushing blow, turned out to be a real success for the First Lady. Even those who had previously viewed Melania through the prism of stereotypes and caricatures were now forced to recognize her as a strong personality. From the very morning of the next day, the media were full of headlines like "Melania Trump put the journalist in her place," or "Calmness and Dignity versus Provocations. Who outplayed whom on live air?" Social networks exploded. Some admired Melania's restraint. Others criticized Sarah's behavior as too rude even for an aggressive talk show. Clips of the footage quickly racked up millions of views, with people in the comments animatedly discussing what it was like to keep a cool head when being bombarded with tough questions. Behind the scenes, Sarah herself was unusually excited. On the one hand, she understood that she had not received a hot sensation. On the other hand, the broadcast had broken the ratings and would definitely go down in the history of the channel as the most watched. And for her, this was certainly a career success, because the result is measured by viewer interest. However, deep down, she admitted to herself that she had underestimated Melania. Perhaps behind the dry press releases and rare public appearances, there really was a person worthy of respect. However, Sarah was in no hurry to agree with this out loud. After all, her reputation as the main sharp journalist of the country was based on the ability to wipe out opponents on live air. But never before in such fights had she had to deal with such composure, which was combined with a subtle ability to turn the situation to her advantage. Over the next week, the topics of the broadcast were discussed by journalists of all stripes. Some commentators said that Melania Trump had probably prepared in advance and that her answers had been rehearsed by political strategists. Others argued that there is no such thing as rehearsal that could give a person such natural composure under intense psychological pressure. Still others complained that Sarah had let her emotions get the better of her and lost control of the interview, while a more subtle approach would have allowed her to ask even tougher questions, but with less of a personal attack. One way or another, everyone agreed on one thing: this conversation would definitely change society's attitude toward both women. Melania, having returned to the White House, continued to conduct her affairs as if nothing special had happened. She calmly participated in official events, gave short comments to the press where she considered necessary, and worked on her projects. But her staff noticed that from that moment on, a special inner fire lit up in the First Lady's eyes, as if confirming that she understood that she was capable of withstanding even the most sophisticated attacks and emerging victorious from them. "Perhaps sometimes it is worth speaking a little louder than I am used to," she mentally noted, summing up the results of the interview. And if she has to face such attacks again, then now she will certainly not let herself be offended. In the corridors of political circles, opinions were shared in whispers. Melania's actions, her self-confident response to provocations, turned out to be not just a pleasant surprise for the president and his team, but a real gift in terms of PR. After all, the image of the First Lady, who quietly stands aside, often causing criticism and contempt from skeptics, suddenly acquired new colors, and so positive that even ardent opponents of Donald Trump's policies were forced to recognize her strength of character. But what is more important, people saw in Melania not an abstract figure, but a living woman who can defend herself and her beliefs before the entire country. Almost all media platforms rebroadcast the most striking fragments of this sensational broadcast. Every detail of Melania's gesture, facial expression, intonation was discussed, commented on, analyzed. Psychologists reasoned that it was her calmness that killed all the provocations. Students studying journalism analyzed Sarah's behavior, her tactical mistakes, moments when she began to speak too harshly and lost the sympathy of the audience. The show turned out to be an incredible case for specialized educational institutions. How an interview can turn against the interviewer if he incorrectly assesses his interlocutor. In the end, when the dust settled, everyone agreed that millions had witnessed the live broadcast, and the resonance of the interview had made it onto every conceivable news feed. Sarah Miller had to admit, albeit quietly, that Melania Trump had withstood the pressure well, staying true to herself. She may not have revealed her personal secrets, but she had shown enough for people to see the real strength in her eyes. Thus ended that evening, which will long be remembered neither in the media space, nor among the viewers who were sitting in front of their TV screens or monitors. It showed that sometimes apparent silence can be louder than any words, and the ability to control oneself is the best response to ridicule and provocation. And even if someone still smirks, calls Melania too reserved or impenetrable, it was precisely this calm energy that gave her the opportunity to gain the upper hand in a seemingly unequal battle with an experienced, sharp-tongued journalist. However, if we recall history, quiet dignity has always had a huge destructive power for those who tried to undermine this dignity. As one of the viewers said, walking along the studio corridor after the broadcast, she beat them all without raising her voice or tone. So much for the humble Melania. Many then wondered, what if it was useful for America to see exactly such a First Lady, not a copy of her husband and not a silent shadow, but an independent woman who acts in her own way and is quite capable of returning attacks back to the attacker. Life has shown that everything is just beginning, and if Sarah Miller ever risks asking provocative questions again, Melania will certainly be ready for it. One way or another, this particular broadcast will remain in memory as an example of how soft power sometimes wins over loud words, and also as proof that one should not underestimate a person just because he behaves more quietly or looks more well-mannered than we are used to seeing in media personalities. Sometimes, behind external calmness, there can be a true inner core, capable of silencing even the harshest criticism. After all, strength is not in shouting and attacks, but in the ability to look a provocateur in the eye and firmly say what you think is necessary, while remaining within the framework of a respectful dialogue. The bottom line is simple. Melania Trump managed to prove to many skeptics that she is not just the president's wife or an appendage to his success, but a person worthy of respect. Her calm in a difficult situation became the best example of how to respond to insults and pressure. Even if someone makes fun of your accent, questions your abilities, or tries to delve into your family issues, maintain your dignity, tell the truth, and do not give in to provocations. After all, this is the strongest position. And even if the conflict itself is forgotten after a while, respect for you will remain. This is what happened with Melania. Her new, deeper image has long been entrenched in the public consciousness, reformatting the attitude towards her as the First Lady. If you enjoyed this story and want more exciting, tense, and motivating stories like this one, be sure to like it, subscribe to our channel, and leave a comment. Share what you think about Melania's behavior or Sarah Miller's interview style. Your opinion is very important to us, because it is thanks to your feedback that we can create more interesting and exciting materials for you. Your activity inspires new stories and encourages us to tell you about even more intriguing events from the world of politics, show business, and more. We are waiting for your feedback and see you soon in the next videos.